Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Join me today as we do some house cleaning, well, yard cleaning. So let's go. If I had to pick between cleaning my house and cleaning my yard, I would absolutely pick cleaning my yard first. But there are certain jobs that I like to put off until later in the season. And one of them is going through my flower beds and basically cleaning them up. And there are a lot of different kinds of cleaning up flower beds. The one we're going to do today is basically finding free seedlings that I have in this flower bed. We're going to be digging them up and we're going to be potting them up. The seedlings are not very small. They're actually pretty big. I showed you in the spring months when they were very, very small. I said we're going to leave them here and we'll tackle them on a later date. Well, that later date has come. When it comes to cleaning up our flower beds, oftentimes you'll have plants that drop their seeds and self-sow or self-seed readily. Sometimes they're annuals, sometimes they're perennials. They're often referred to as volunteer plants. And volunteer plants are opportunity. They're basically free plants that we can take and move somewhere else in our landscape. And in fact, I have a whole bunch of free plants in this area right behind me that we're going to be digging up today. Before we get started, I want to tell you what the plant is. It's Black-Eyed Susan or Rudbeckia. I absolutely love this plant. It blooms for such a long time and it blooms during the time of the year when I don't have a whole lot of color happening in my yard. One of the downfalls of this plant is that it does seed itself everywhere. Some people don't like it for that reason and they dig up every single speck of this plant out of their landscape. Me, I want to have this plant all around my landscape, at least in those sections that are full sun because that's where it's going to do the best. Now, if I had a place where I knew exactly where I want to put all these free seedlings, it would be much easier for me to dig them up and move them to their new home. In fact, I do know a general idea of where they're going to go next year. But those spots are not ready for them quite yet. And I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to dig all of these up and plunk them in my landscape knowing that I need to move them again. I'd rather dig them up, pot them up, and basically shop my yard next year. So I challenge you to start doing the same thing. Walk around your yard and pick one type of plant. Maybe it's a Black-Eyed Susan, maybe it's another perennial, but pick one kind of plant that you've seen in your yard that is in a place where you don't want it to be, but you know it's a seedling that dropped itself there. Dig it up and move it. Or you can do what I'm going to do, which is dig it up, pot it up, and then place it in your landscape next year. Many of you have asked me, what do I do with these potted plants that I am digging up right now in the fall months? I like to do what's called healing the plants in. I'm going to be making a different video on a future date that goes more into detail about how and why I like to heal my plants in. But the basic gist of it is taking a plant and sinking it in the ground so that its roots are protected during the winter months. So it's basically like taking a plant and planting it out in the landscape, except you might have it in a pot instead. Right here next to my garage is where I have a whole bunch of Black-Eyed Susan. And what happens is when they bloom, their seeds go everywhere and I end up with free plants. In the end, we're going to count how many free plants we have. We have one over here, and then we have some more in this section. And as we walk up along my front walkway, well, you can see them. They're nicely placed actually towards the front of the flower bed. And as we head away from that big patch of Black-Eyed Susans, there are still some in here, but not as many. Now, I have to tell you, there is another seedling that's a perennial that's going to have to come out. Today, we're not going to focus on that. I want to keep it very simple and I want to just focus on Black-Eyed Susans. And I'm setting a realistic goal for us. I just want us to tackle the Black-Eyed Susans that are towards the front of this flower bed. We're not going to worry about the Black-Eyed Susans that are also tucked in towards the back of this flower bed. We have a nice big one over there. And then as we move this way, we have one or two more over here. And we're still on the other side of the area we're going to be working on. Well, look at how big this plant is. These got huge. They were not this big in the springtime because if they were, I would have dug them up. And there may be another one or two in this flower bed. I'm just quickly scanning it. Somehow one appeared way down over here. What we're going to do is we're only going to focus on that one area that we talked about. And then on a different day, I'll be coming out here and my goal will be to come out and just dig the Black-Eyed Susans that are in what I call this pansy holding bed. There are a few ways I can tackle this job. I could come in and dig one plant at a time, bring it over to my area where I'm potting them up and pot up the plant, and then come back and dig another plant, bring it to my potting area, and pot the second plant up. I might do that if it was a warm, hot, sunny day, but right now the sun is on the other side of the house and it's cooling down. So I feel comfortable just going ahead and digging up a bunch of them. Maybe we'll dig up all of them, I'm not sure, but let's start digging. I have a 5-gallon bucket here. I'm going to be digging and putting the plants inside this bucket. My main goal is to pot these up and have them available for myself for next year. When I'm working on garden projects in the spring, I can shop my own little plant nursery. But I do need to share with you that I actually sold out of this plant. As some of you know, I sell plants from my house. I have an actual plant nursery here on my driveway, and I don't have any black-eyed Susans left. So not only am I doing this job for myself for next spring so I can go shopping, but also I'm doing this for anyone else that may be looking to buy the same plant. And when we dug this up, I just want to show you, it was actually 2 plants. So what I'm going to be doing is potting up 1 plant per 3-inch pot. You may have black-eyed Susan in your landscape, and if you noticed that it hasn't put on a spectacular show, that maybe it didn't bloom as nicely for you, then that's another indicator that the plant is trying to tell you that it's time for you to divide it. In fact, right next to my garage, I showed you that flower bed there with all the black-eyed Susans. Those black-eyed Susans did not put on a spectacular show for me. So on a different day, I am going to have to go in there and I'm going to have to dig up some clumps and divide it so that it puts on a better show for me next year. I'm trying to get as much of the root ball as I can as I dig each of these sections up. And you'll notice I am removing quite a bit of the soil off of the roots. You don't have to do that if you were doing the same job. I just like doing that because I don't want to have to replace any soil in my landscape. It's funny because in the springtime, these plants were so tiny. They really were. It's amazing how much growth they've put on in just one season. There are always so many jobs for us to do in our gardens, especially this time of year. But this is a job that I definitely wanted to do for the fall months, and I knew I had limited amount of time for working in my garden today. And that's why I chose to do this job, because I felt like it's something that I could do, that I could start and finish within this small amount of time that I have. And that helps me when it comes to accomplishing just objectives that I have on things I want to do in my garden without feeling overwhelmed. If I was to start some other project today that, let's say, takes a whole entire day to do, I wouldn't feel that amount of satisfaction that I'll feel when we're all done with this project. I almost didn't make this video today because I thought, well, it's actually quite repetitive what I'm doing, but I feel like it's real life gardening. I feel like, I had to get this job done anyway. Why not bring you along? And maybe it will inspire you to do the same thing, to find an area where you have some freebie plants. And maybe you're going to go out there today or tomorrow and you're going to tackle those plants. And again, you might be doing it a little differently. You might be taking the plants and then putting them somewhere else in your landscape, which is just as satisfying. It was definitely very sunny in this area earlier today. I thought about doing this job then, but I didn't want to be out here. It's almost 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which isn't that hot, but with the sun coming down, it wouldn't be good for the plants. And now that it's later in the afternoon, it's much better for these plants, especially because I'm digging up so many at once. I have a flower bed behind me, and it's called the bay window flower bed. That flower bed is jam-packed with a perennial called great blue lobelia. Again, I could feel overwhelmed about that whole idea because it looks actually like a big weedy mess. Or that would be on a day that I have more time available and I'll just go after the great blue lobelia. And most likely, I won't do all of it in one day. I might tell myself, I'm going to do from this point to this point and get all the great blue lobelia dug up and potted up. And then the next day, or whenever I have time, I could do another section of that bed. There are so many different ways you can chunk up and tackle projects in your garden. I always say this, I like to do it in bite-sized morsels. And I also like to look at how much time I have available and then try to set a realistic goal of something I can accomplish. And when I do that, it just makes me feel better. I did have quite a few of this black-eyed Susans in my plant nursery, but a nice person is buying them, and so now I don't have any. And then I thought to myself, wait a minute, but I do have a lot. I have all of these, so why not just replenish what's missing from my plant nursery with all of these plants? And I do have to spend quite a bit of time. I've been putting it off, but I do need to spend time down in my plant nursery because there are a lot of plants that need to be moved around, potted up, or if I lost a plant or two, I need to pull those pots. I have mulch in this flower bed, but I'm not worrying too much about moving the mulch aside, digging up each plant, and then replacing the mulch. Most likely, I'll just remulch this area in the springtime. I mentioned earlier about replenishing my stock or inventory in my plant nursery. And I know a lot of you also have your own plant nursery where you sell plants. You'll have to let me know in the comments below, what are some things that you're doing in your plant nursery right now during these early fall months? And let me know where you live, because that also matters. Maybe you live somewhere where you have a much longer growing season. Or maybe you live somewhere like I do and your growing season is short, because that will also dictate the kind of jobs that you can do this time of year. For me, there is a certain point where I really can't be doing jobs like this anymore. After all, these plants need time for their roots to establish before the ground freezes. So I've learned, unfortunately the hard way, that I can't be dividing plants too late into the season, because then those plants have a higher likelihood of not surviving our harsh winters. If you've been following my channel, then you've seen that we've been doing small jobs just in this flower bed, little by little. And that just has worked really well for me. And mind you, this is just one of many flower beds. So that's what I try to do, is just try to find little jobs I can do within a given amount of time and within a given flower bed. As I'm digging up these black-eyed Susans, every so often I feel like maybe, just maybe, I see a very tiny seedling of a black-eyed Susan. Well, I'm not going to worry about the smallest little seedling, because that little small seedling next spring will be a much bigger seedling, and then we'll just go after it next spring. I had planned on turning the camera off as I dug the rest of these seedlings up. But honestly, I feel like you're here with me and I'm chatting with a friend while I'm working in my garden. There's always so many things that I can share or that I want to share. And I'd rather do it while I'm working rather than waiting until the end of the video and getting it all in at the end. So as I'm digging up this black-eyed Susan, all around it, it's surrounded by the great blue lobelia seedlings. I am just turning a blind eye to them. I don't see them. In fact, one's trying to come out and I'm like, no, you're going back in the ground for a different day. The bay window bed that I was telling you about is at the end of my walkway right here. I did notice that there is one more black-eyed Susan tucked in towards the front here. So I'm going to take that one as well. But then we're going to stop. We're not going to worry about any black-eyed Susans that might be hiding in the back here, because that's not the scope of our project for today. I'm not sure how I saw it, but it was this little leaf that gave it away. It's just tucked in here. This is where I pot up my plants. We're basically under a covered shed, and it's a great area for me to pot up plants. I'm not outside in the sun, and the plants are not outside in the sun. I have a wheelbarrow filled with used potting mix, and the potting mix is 50%, and the other 50% is pretty much compost that I had in an old raised bed from my backyard. I have these trays that are used, and I'm going to be reusing them. I get them for free from a local garden center. And then I have a whole bunch of square 4-inch pots that I also got free from a local garden center, as well as a greenhouse that was closing. So the plan is for us to do only one of these together, and I want to share some important tips. That's what the roots look like. We have a small leaf here. That's a brand new leaf. We're going to keep that one there. And other than this small leaf, we're also going to keep another small leaf on the plant. The larger leaves, we're going to go ahead and we're going to cut them back. I'm going to use hand pruners to cut the large leaves back. The reason we're doing that is we are telling the plant not to support these large leaves. In fact, these large leaves will look very sad if we keep them on here. Instead, we're telling the plant to redirect its energy into supporting these small roots and to create more roots as we head into the winter season. But notice we are leaving a few leaves on the plant, and the reason we're doing that is we still want the plant to feed the roots and feed the plant through photosynthesis. Since it doesn't have very extensive roots, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill my pot all the way to the top. It's really up to you how many leaves you want to keep on your plant. This rule applies to many plants, not just the black-eyed Susan. If you're transplanting a plant, even if it's in the summertime, and that plant has a ton of foliage on it, you can go ahead and cut off some of those larger leaves because the plant is already undergoing a lot of stress. So to minimize the stress, it's a good idea to cut back some of those bigger leaves. We can go ahead and we can tuck the plant in, and I want to make sure that the roots are beneath soil level, but this part right here where new leaves are going to come, that should be at soil level. That's basically the crown of the plant. So I'm just pressing down a little bit to make sure that those roots are secure. And right here you can see that the plant is going to push out another leaf pretty soon. It might look sad, but trust me, it's better for the plant to remove a lot of those leaves. I'm going to do the same process with all the other plants that I have, and in the end I'll show you how many plants we end up with. When we first started digging up the Rudbeckia, I wasn't sure how many plants we would be digging up. I would never have guessed there were 30 plants. That's a lot of plants. I can tell you in my long border, I have black-eyed Susan or Rudbeckia there, and each little section started with maybe 3 plants. And then they are now huge sections in my long border. So you can imagine 30 plants right here, one day will really fill in either my gardens or someone else's gardens, which is a very exciting thing when these were basically free plants. I'm really glad that we cut back all the leaves. That's just so important at this time of year, or again, even if you were doing this job during the summer months. You want that plant to put its energy into creating more new leaves and also into creating stronger roots. You don't want the plants to support some big leaves. And speaking of those leaves, these are going to get added to my compost pile. They're a nice green material. One thing I forgot to mention earlier is that when you're working with plants in your garden, especially perennials, feel free to prune the roots. That's also called root pruning. So the plants that we were working with today, their roots were all manageable. They were not very extensive or very big roots, so I was able to fit the roots into those small little pots without a problem. However, if the roots were very big and they were not going to fit inside of those pots, I would have just come in and cut back some of the roots a little bit. You don't want to go too crazy with that process, but don't be afraid to do it either. I always end my videos by saying, I hope that this video inspired you in some way, but I'm going to end it a little differently today. I want to thank each and every one of you for helping me out. When I make videos like this, you're actually inspiring me to complete a project in my yard that I needed to do, I've been wanting to do, and I needed that push, I needed that motivation. So thank you for inspiring me to get this job done. And in return, I'm really hoping that this inspired you to do something similar in your yard. It might not be the same exact type of job, it might be some other job, but I'm hoping that these videos motivate you in one way or the other. And until the next video when we tackle another project, make it a great day with gardening.